The images were carefully staged. Xi Jinping stood at the center, with Vladimir Putin to his right and Kim Jong-un to his left. Three leaders united in defiance of the West as rows of hypersonic missiles and drone swarms rolled past Tiananmen Square.
In a lot of areas of military technology, and so this parade is an opportunity for China to demonstrate the growing power of its defense industry.
The message was unmistakable. China is no longer hiding its military ambitions. Beijing's military parade was more than a theater. It was a declaration of strength and of alignment. China, Russia, and North Korea, each under heavy Western sanctions, are now presenting themselves as a new axis of power. Officially, China's defense budget is about $230 billion. Independent analysts say the real figure is closer to $350 billion. That makes Beijing the world's second largest military spender, and still climbing. For Xi, this parade wasn't about spectacle.
It is a message to the US, to US allies in the region that, hey, China is an advanced military capability, and China is able to act on its strategic requirements through its military.
From the South China Sea to cyberspace, from hypersonics to space weapons. What we are seeing is not a single event, but the opening act of a new global arms race. This is Wealth Decoded, the channel where we follow the money to uncover how power is built, hidden, and fought over. In every episode, we decode the fortunes and strategies behind the elites shaping our world. Today, we turn to one of the most explosive wealth engines of all, the new global arms race. Subscribe to Wealth Decoded, and you'll never just watch the headlines. You'll understand the fortunes and forces driving them. Why this sudden surge? Several shocks have forced governments to rethink decades of complacency. Ukraine. Russia's invasion drained NATO arsenals, exposing shortages in artillery and air defense. Middle East. Ongoing wars push Gulf states and Israel to accelerate imports. Taiwan risk. Beijing's threats drive US and Asian allies to bulk up defenses. These crises existed before, but the pace of rearmament has accelerated dramatically under Trump's return to office. His rhetoric, questioning NATO's value, hinting at pulling US troops from Asia, praising strongmen like Putin and Kim, unsettled both allies and rivals. For Europe, it meant spending billions more to prepare for a future without guaranteed American protection. For the Middle East, it meant doubling down on US arms purchases while they still could. And for Beijing and New Delhi, it meant moving faster to secure regional dominance before America recalibrates again. The result is a synchronized surge in global defense budgets, the fastest since the Cold War. In 2025 alone, global military spending is projected to surpass $2.5 trillion, a record in modern history. For Xi Jinping, defense modernization is central to what he calls national rejuvenation. And the scale of investment is staggering. A decade ago, China's official defense budget was about $120 billion. By 2025, it has more than doubled, crossing $246 billion. Year after year, increases of 6 to 7% have kept military spending well ahead of GDP growth.
So what we've seen over the past 20 years is actually China has increased their defense spending year by year about 10%. So 7% of the current GDP is still a very significant amount, and it has real implications for peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits.
But the strategy goes beyond raw numbers. Beijing's goal is clear: deter American intervention and project Chinese power well beyond its shores. That means a navy built for the Pacific, missile forces designed to keep US carriers at bay, and AI-driven drones and surveillance systems to dominate the gray zones of cyber and space. Since 2015, China has doubled the size of its navy, now the world's largest fleet by ship numbers. It is testing hypersonic glide vehicles that can bypass US missile shields. Unlike Europe or the Middle East, this spending stays mostly at home, fueling state-owned giants like AVIC, Norinco, and CSSC. These are not just companies. They are instruments of state power, mobilized to challenge US dominance in every domain: land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. If China wanted attention, it got it. Washington is responding with the largest defense budget in its history. Under Trump, U.S. military spending is projected at nearly $950 billion in 2025, up almost 8% from last year. That is more than the next 10 countries combined.
Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961.6 billion budget request, more than $1 trillion for national security, will end 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military.
This surge is not just about buying more weapons. It reflects a new strategy: sustain American dominance across every theater. From deterring China in the Pacific, to supporting NATO against Russia, to securing Israel in the Gulf, the U.S. is building for simultaneous conflicts on multiple fronts. Investments are shifting toward next-generation air power, naval supremacy, missile defense, and AI-driven warfare, capabilities designed to maintain global reach.
We're reviving our defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process, rapidly fielding emerging technologies and new weapons to meet the challenges of the future. This budget invests $25 billion in Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland.
The beneficiaries are America's defense giants. Lockheed Martin reports a backlog of over $160 billion, with record demand for F-35 fighter jets. Northrop Grumman is accelerating production of the new B-21 Raider stealth bomber. Raytheon is shipping Patriot missile systems to allies from Poland to Israel. It's not just about security. Defense has become one of the most reliable engines of U.S. economic growth. For Wall Street, Trump's America First defense buildup is a golden decade for the military-industrial complex. For decades, Europe enjoyed what was called the peace dividend, cutting defense budgets after the Cold War. That era is over.
We are in an era of rearmament.
The war in Ukraine and uncertainty about U.S. commitments have forced a dramatic shift.
The states would increase their defense spending by 1.5% of GDP on average.
Germany has pledged to meet and sustain the NATO benchmark of 2% of GDP. Poland is already spending over 4% and is buying U.S. Abrams tanks and South Korean howitzers at scale. France, Sweden, and Italy are all pushing billions into next-generation fighters, submarines, and air defense. Markets have responded. Rheinmetall, Germany's arms champion, is up more than 45% year-to-date. BAE Systems in the UK trades at record highs. Defense has gone from being a political liability to an investment darling. Europe is now rearming at a pace not seen since the 1980s. Rearmament is not only swelling budgets, it is reshaping Europe's capital markets. Major defense firms are racing to tap investor demand. Leonardo, Italy's aerospace and defense giant, is preparing spin-offs. Saab of Sweden and divisions of Rheinmetall are exploring multi-billion-dollar listings. Analysts expect up to $20 to $30 billion in IPOs and equity raises from European defense companies over the next 18 months.
Looking at the increase that is expected for the European governments to keep increasing their budget for spending, I think it's hard to believe that we are at peak yet. I think there's still a considerable amount of potential for this whole sector in the next, well, probably even 5 to 10 years. But again, it's obviously very difficult to predict those markets.
This wave reflects a deeper truth. Defense is no longer a sleepy sector. It is where investors now see growth, margins, and government guarantees. In Europe, once reluctant to even discuss military spending, arms makers are suddenly the hottest tickets on the exchange. Across the Middle East, defense spending is rising, but with a distinct logic. The strategy is integrated air and missile defense against Iran and its proxies, knit Patriot, THAAD, and regional sensors into a single shield, trained together and by its scale. In 2024, the region's military outlays climbed to $243 billion, plus 15% year over year. Saudi Arabia led with $80.3 billion. Israel surged 65% to $46.5 billion as it fought simultaneous fronts. More than half of the region's arms imports come from the US, 52%, with Italy, France, and Germany next. So much of this money flows to Western primes. Israel alone has 61 U.S. combat aircraft pending, 50 ordered in 2024. In parallel, Washington and Gulf partners trained in 2025 on Joint Integrated Air Missile Defense, the region's operating concept for a missile and drone century. Lockheed Martin sells F-35 fighters to Israel. Raytheon delivers Patriot missile batteries across the Gulf. BAE Systems supplies Typhoon jets to Saudi Arabia. Every escalation in Gaza, Yemen, or Lebanon translates directly into new contracts for Western defense giants. This dependency is by design. For Gulf monarchies, imported weapons are also political currency, binding Washington and London closer as security guarantors. For Western arms makers, the Middle East is no longer just a market. It is a recurring revenue stream, backed by endless conflict and state-to-state deals. India is now the world's fourth largest defense spender, with a budget of $78.7 billion in 2025, up nearly 10% from last year. But New Delhi's goal is bigger than buying weapons. The strategy is self-reliance. For decades, India depended on imports, mostly from Russia. That dependency is shrinking fast. Russia's share of Indian arms imports has fallen from 55% a decade ago to just 36% today. France, Israel, and the US are stepping in, while India builds more at home. State-linked companies are leading the push. Hindustan Aeronautics makes Tejas fighter jets and Dhruv helicopters. Bharat Electronics produces radars and missile systems. Larsen & Toubro manufactures artillery and submarines. These firms are not just contractors. They are listed companies, and their stocks have surged. Even exports are climbing, from just $230 million in 2014 to more than $2.5 billion in 2024. India's strategy is clear: turn defense from a national liability into an industrial engine. But India isn't the only one rewriting the playbook. A new generation of companies, especially in the US and Europe, is racing to design weapons built not around steel and fuel, but around AI and autonomy. This is the frontier of the arms race: software and autonomy.
A troop of AI-driven robots that could be used for all kinds of tasks, from reconnaissance to logistics to combat. This technology would not just eliminate the problem of signal jamming, but exponentially increase the belligerents' capacities.
War with less and less human involvement is what we're witnessing. So the challenge today is how to anticipate it, and above all, to be able to react with the new situation.
To equip its forces as quickly as possible, Amiad is training its own AI models. More than 400 applications are in development, with some already operational, such as algorithms to aid decision-making for old and new weapons.
In Europe, Helsing, backed by billions in venture funding, is building AI systems that fuse sensors across fighter jets and air defenses. Its algorithms have already been used in Ukraine, guiding strike drones by the thousands. Valued at more than $13 billion, Helsing is Europe's flagship bet on AI defense. In the US, Anduril Industries is mass-producing autonomous drones and loitering munitions. Valued at nearly $28 billion, it is building factories in both America and Britain to scale unmanned systems. Shield AI, at $5.3 billion, has flown F-16 and drones entirely by AI in contested skies. Epirus, with its Leonidas microwave weapon, is testing ways to disable drone swarms. And Skydio is supplying the US Army with small AI-powered drones for reconnaissance. Together, these firms point to the next phase of warfare: battles driven less by pilots and soldiers and more by algorithms, autonomy, and mass deployment at machine speed. Behind them is a flood of capital. Venture firms once chasing social apps are now racing to back defense AI. Billions in VC and sovereign wealth money are flowing into what they see as the next trillion-dollar sector. The future battlefield is being written not in steel, but in algorithms and autonomy at machine speed. The numbers are staggering. In 2025, global military spending is set to pass $2.5 trillion, the highest in recorded history. But the trend is even more striking. Just a decade ago, in 2015, the world spent about $1.7 trillion. By 2020, it had climbed to $2 trillion. In only 5 years, another $500 billion has been added. That is an average increase of $80 to $90 billion every single year. More than the entire defense budget of a country like Turkey or South Korea added annually to global totals. The United States accounts for 38% of today's total at nearly $950 billion. China follows with an estimated $350 billion, or 15%. Europe collectively spends about $500 billion, more than doubling since Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. India now budgets $79 billion, while the Middle East contributes another $240 billion. For the first time since the Cold War, every major region is rearming at once. This isn't incremental, it's exponential. Defense has become not just a security line item, but one of the fastest growing engines of the global economy. The arms race is fueling fortunes. Defense stocks have outperformed tech in 2025. European IPOs are oversubscribed. AI-driven startups are attracting billions in venture funding. But wealth comes with risk. Every contract, every drone factory deepens the link between corporate profits and global instability. Governments and investors alike now have financial incentives to sustain the cycle. When President Eisenhower left office in 1961, he warned of the military-industrial complex, the danger that industry and the Pentagon could lock nations into endless buildup. 6 decades later, his warning is no longer just American. It is global. The US, China, Europe, India, and the Middle East are all bound into what is now a worldwide military-industrial ecosystem. And unlike Eisenhower's era, today it is supercharged by AI, software, and trillions in capital markets. From Xi, Putin, and Kim on the parade stand in Beijing, to Trump's trillion-dollar budgets, to Europe's IPO boom, to Saudi, Israeli, and Gulf billions pouring into Western arms, to India's factories, and Silicon Valley's AI drone startups. The new global arms race is here. It is rewriting defense strategies, reshaping stock markets, and moving trillions of dollars. For Wealth Decoded, the lesson is simple. Follow the money and you see how power is shifting. This is Wealth Decoded, where we uncover the fortunes and forces driving the world's elites. Subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden economics of global power.